Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you can hear me. I can hear you all. Okay, great. Thank you. Uh, I actually lead the data science practice at Impetus. Impetus is a company who works well with AWS. And today I want to be talking about navigating the growth frontiers of generative AI. As you know, there are a lot of things happening with generative AI. And what we want to bring to the front today is how to kind of navigate this step-by-step process, because there's so many options for enterprises to go with. And as part of this, I want to start with the quote from Swami Subramanian from AWS, because the main thing is that your data is a differentiator, especially for enterprises. Models are available. There are a lot of models and a lot of processes and steps are available, but what really differentiates you is your data. And the more value you can create with your data by building on top of it, you are actually better positioning yourself for adding value to your end customers. So as part of that, what I want to talk about is the implications for generative AI if your strategy is not done right, if your data and infrastructure and other pieces are not harmonized. So you will essentially miss the market opportunities there are. And that's a big challenge, because right now Gen AI is really catching fire, and there's so many things that enterprises are wanting to do. But in order for you to do that, you want to be able to kind of create use cases. But if you're not able to create the right use cases, then they won't be successful. So in order for you to be able to do that, you have to be also able to scale them. And as part of the scaling process, we have to make sure that all these steps are done in a very step-by-step process. And this is what I'll be talking today about, to kind of create the whole process in a stepwise process fashion. And as part of this step, so what we are kind of proposing is a 5-step approach, which is kind of take the enterprises from a low level of maturity and readiness for Gen AI to a level where they can actually build and safely, securely scale generative AI applications. So this includes pieces around creating a strategy for all of your generative AI applications. What do you need to do to bring your data and infrastructure? So how do you kind of go planning for all that? So that's a first step. And then to go to the next generative AI foundation, and beyond that to add the responsible AI pieces on top, and contextualizing and enriching. So I'll be talking about each of these very briefly, but each of these pillars brings certain value to the whole process. And you can interchange few of these depending on where you are. And some of the leaders are probably further ahead, but a lot of enterprises are still in the early stages of adoption. And as part of the next steps, I'll be talking about each of these steps in more detail. So the first is generative AI strategy and architecture. Without this architecture in play, what you would end up is primarily a process where you cannot scale the applications further down. But today, a lot of enterprises are in a stage where they have a lot of data warehouses, a lot of components in silos. So bringing all of those pieces and creating a platform to kind of get you to the next stage to help you do that. So we actually have a way of building a maturity model and doing an assessment. And that helps you also prioritize the use cases and kind of build the guardrails on top of that. So what are all the pieces that need to go into this to create your strategy and build a very high performance architecture to kind of enable you to select different LLMs, because you also have options between proprietary LLMs and also open source versions. So you need to choose which ones to go with. So in this space, we are actually doing work with creating a strategic plan for a large banking institution. So as part of the steps to kind of enable them to kind of adopt Gen AI. But to get there, they need to be able to kind of plan out all of these steps. And this roadmap and assessment is what is kind of going to help build all of that. And as the next step, for you to get to the next stage of enabling you to kind of create the use cases, we first need to bring all the data together. And there's multiple data sources in the enterprise. And you can start small. You can actually do things even on small data sets. But if you don't do this at an enterprise scale, the scalability becomes a problem later. So to help you get there, what we can do is unify all the data estate for generative AI. As part of this, you need to look at data labeling, you need to look at data quality, enhancing all the steps, and also integrating data sources. So we have accelerators to help do this with data quality enhancement, schema optimization, and various other solutions. So we actually kind of also help enterprises kind of take the existing data sources and facilitate the overall Gen AI use case deployment. So as part of this, we are working with a large digital insurance provider in many of these areas where we have built a platform and enabled them to scale their applications. The next step is also the deployment requires you to kind of also take into consideration many applications that reside existing in their existing platforms. So how do you integrate all of those and enable you to kind of bring all the existing data sources and all the context of the business that is using those applications. So as part of that, we have a capability to bring a reference architecture and an accelerator for creating a data platform. So that is an accelerator that you can use with one click to essentially create all the structures required, and we're using that with the large airlines to kind of deploy the use cases that they're building on Bedrock. And there are 50 plus use cases we are building for this airlines. And the last step I want to cover here is about the enterprise readiness. So as part of that, how do you kind of create the context? So this requires you to kind of integrate existing data and build capabilities to easily find the data you're looking for. So here we are actually kind of creating search with retrieval augmented generation, which is RAG, and LLMs that we can actually drive with AWS. And the integration is something with LangChain and other sources, so we can actually create a sequential set of applications to enable our customers. In this space, we are actually doing work with a large financial services organization for payments, enabling them to do semantic search and using transformer models. So as part of this whole thing, the next step is governance, right? This is the key thing. So there are a lot of things that you can do with Gen AI, but unless it is done right, unless you are bringing the aspects of bias handling, privacy and security, so it becomes a challenge. So to allow you to do that, we have capabilities to obfuscate data. We also generate synthetic data with generative adversarial networks and LLMs, and also kind of be able to kind of do reliable, do solutions that can be assured to kind of generate the right results. So each time, because these are generative processes, we want to be sure that they're giving you the right responses each time you ask them. And the next step is ethical AI, and to remove bias in the data. So there are processes to do all of these. And the next is the regulatory and risk frameworks. So here what we do is kind of add the ability for enterprises to deal with compliance issues and also be able to kind of address regulatory requirements and also be able to kind of look at transparency and accountability issues. So each of these steps are generative and responsible AI. So these are things we are working with many customers, and to kind of deal in the regulated environment, what needs to be done, what are all the pieces of the puzzle that needs to go into one place. So there are various things that go under each of these which we can talk more about. So that's one of the other pillars. So the fourth pillar I'll talk about is contextualizing and enriching Gen AI, right? So for you to be able to do this, we have the capability to kind of deal with prompt engineering libraries, because today LLMs give you the right results, but unless you ask the right question the right way and you have the ability to repeat their prompts and optimize them, it becomes a challenge. So prompt engineering libraries and optimization is something we do in that area. I talked about synthetic data generation, and vector search is another important factor, because you want to be able to create the vector databases, stand them up, and be able to kind of search through all of that quickly. So setting up all the infrastructure for all of that is important. Also enriching the data is priority for many applications. So here we bring the concept of knowledge graphs and be able to kind of write in the right way to build the knowledge graph from your data and also add that on top of the existing solution. So the solutions can query the graph and get the information. So now the next key puzzle is tailoring all of this for the industry requirements. And here you can actually build those LLMs for specific applications in your target industry and kind of create the capability to drive specific responses. And here we are working with the large financial services organization, where we are helping them kind of identify the right responses to talk to customers, primarily for sales agents to be able to give them the right information. So unless you are able to identify the information that a customer is looking for, the conversation will extend longer. So you have to be able to kind of find the right information at the right time So this is where we are doing in this organization. So under scaling aspect, we're working with deploying and monitoring the LLM. Excuse me. So deployment is very important here. So we're working with all the enterprises to kind of help them use all the applications. And also we can actually build use cases and deploy them. But the challenge is how do you industrialize the development? Because unless you are able to create this a quick process, oh thank you. Excuse me. So unless you are able to kind of quickly build and deploy the applications and industrialize them, it becomes a challenge. So this is what we are doing with many of our customers. So we also are actually involving the measurement, the performance tracking, which is something that is very important for LLMs today, because you are able to scale these applications, but unless the LLM that you're using, the performance matches what you need, it becomes a challenge, because it leads you into issues with hallucinations and many other things you have to track continuously. So as part of this, we are actually working with a large airlines to kind of build applications on AWS Bedrock, Amazon Bedrock, and build 50 plus use cases that we are taking to production with this airlines. So this is something that's very important here. And the next step is talking about various use cases where we can actually talk about chatbots and conversational agents, which we are doing with many customers, which is a key part of a lot of things that people are using LLMs for. And as part of the next step, we are also working with customers in the area of personalization and content generation for sales, marketing. So here content generation is very important, and you have to be able to personalize and in fact hyper personalize that which for applications. So this is something we are working with one of our key strategic partners on. And code generation and documentation, another piece where we can actually use Code Whisperer and various other solutions to kind of generate code and also generate documentation for the code, so that becomes easier. And the next step is around product discovery and generation. So essentially being able to kind of look at all the product offerings that you have in your organization and kind of create content for all that and be able to generate that as the users request you for information. Enterprise search is another important thing, because it goes in front of every other application that may be used in enterprise, because you want to be able to search through information effectively, and to be able to do this with RAG and LLMs, as I talked about earlier, is very important. And be able to scale this so you can actually search through all your enterprise data. And as part of this, we are working with many applications, many enterprises on research and report generation as well, because this is an important aspect to be able to pull all the information, ingest that, and make it available to the LLM for kind of generating the right reports. And we are doing this for insurance, banking, financial services, and healthcare, and so forth. Claims submission management and reporting is another area that we are working on, because for insurance companies, this is a very important aspect to be able to kind of look at claims reports, figure out what is the way to kind of reduce their, the leakage through false claims, and kind of be able to kind of track that. So there's a lot of manual process involved in looking through all of these, and to be able to kind of automate all these processes with generative AI is very powerful for these organizations. Translation and content localization is again another important aspect we're working on, and we have delivered solutions for customers in this space, because in fact for some customers they have locations in different geographies, so be able to kind of tailor the content for those locales is an important aspect. And there are many other applications and use cases which I'm not talking about given the time, but I'll be happy to talk about more as if you can come by our booth. And there are various other principles also to getting started with generative AI, because the main important aspect for getting generative AI right is getting your data estate in the right spot. Today what happens is if you have a data lake, then that's one first step. If you're not, you have to kind of bring all your data warehouses into a place where all the data can be integrated and kind of be made available to the LLMs. But again, you have to address the privacy and security concerns as I talked about, and be able to kind of start small, because obviously generative AI is a big journey, and it's almost like the way it was at the .com time. there's a lot of things happening now. Some things may stick, some may not. But how do you kind of make sure that you're able to scale these applications? So be able to kind of create that culture within your organization to understand the capabilities that you can unlock and innovation that can be created. So this is what we can help customers with, and also be able to kind of validate and test all these models, and also be able to kind of set up the due diligence and guardrails and all of the pieces that go into creating a powerful generative AI application. And we are seeing many examples of this. So the main important thing is there will be failures along the way, but it's necessary to be able to experiment, but learn from each experiment and kind of create the next steps. And one thing I really caught my attention in the keynote session this morning was Swami Subramanian's point on the data foundation being enriched by the AI models themselves, because it's a fuel that drives the whole cycle. So this is a flywheel that kind of drives the process, but if you don't get the flywheel will not be able to run well. So that's a key part. And to help you navigate the journey, your generative AI journey with Impetus, we have various pieces that we can bring to help you get this process. The first step is being able to do a readiness assessment, we can help you do, and that kind of puts in place a generative AI maturity model and creates a roadmap for you to take the path from a traditional ML to generative AI future. And to help you get there, we have a data and AI labs structure where we can actually work with you to kind of build a quick solution, architecture for solution in the design lab, and a short a build lab which can essentially kind of show you the value of that solution. An example is, for example, could be an enterprise search or something similar to kind of create the proof of value for your organization. And this brings in other pieces around the Impetus generative AI services, where we can actually bring in the data unification piece to kind of drive all of the generative applications, the LLM selection, and because there are lots of LLMs, and now we are also going to be moving into multimodal language models, and also vision models and so forth. So it becomes a challenge. So you have to be able to use all of this knowledge and also drive this through the LLM ops for scaling them. And finally, kind of enabling you to kind of build these applications at scale. So we have proven frameworks and accelerators to help you drive in this process. And we are actually we have a booth that you can come by and talk to us. It's booth number 981, and it's also the 10A, I believe. So to summarize, I want to first of all thank all of you, and also want to kind of highlight the aspects around the 5 pillars I talked about at the front, which is essentially creating a roadmap for your whole structure, and then going to the data AI strategy and enabling you to kind of unify all your data, bring everything together in one place, and then create a responsible AI layer on top of that, and then kind of enrich and contextualize your AI, and finally scale all of this through the overall processes. So I'll be happy to take any questions. Let me just stop here. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.